Disney's certainly desperate to string a few wins together at the box office, and while they can make public perception see things as the way they want them to, unfortunately, more often than not, we do have to crunch the numbers here. And one of the things that's really concerning with Mufasa, apart from its very odd behavior in day-to-day theatrical performance since its opening weekend, is the fact that when you compare it to its predecessor that was released in 2019, these numbers get a little terrifying, and especially when you also consider that each of these movies cost about the same as one another, you really start to see how much of an audience has left when it comes to Disney's general fare. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. I love the fact that we keep attracting the trolls in the audience. It's so awesome. Let's talk about this. Because I guess according to many of the trolls out there, we don't call balls and strikes, which has been quite literally the hallmark of this channel since day effing one.
Let's do Lion King.
Yeah, I know. I brought this up for a reason. People are like, oh, look at, no, it's not Mufasa. I want to talk about this for a minute.
Tell me, Simba.
We have to talk about the box office here. I want you to look, Pro, what would you, give me a very ballpark estimate here of what you would say is the domestic to international ratio?
Oh, I'm seeing about a 1-to-2 ratio for the Lion King 2019.
Yeah, I mean, the domestic box office is about 1/3, right? So, yeah, one third from the U.S., 2/3 from international, exactly.
1-to-2, that makes 3 parts. Folks, we're good at math here.
There we go. So, in that regard, when you look at this, $1.6 million was the global gross for a film that reportedly cost about 200 some odd million, right?
We call that profit.
Yes, exactly. If we scroll down here, production budget $260 million. I would say, as many things named Disney back from that era, and even still to this day, was probably underrepresented, and that production budget probably exceeded $300 million. They probably had about another 150 plus million at least in global marketing. Probably the total cost for this film between production and marketing was likely between $400 and $500 million. Now, if we break down the $1.6 billion that it hauled in globally, and we gave it a breakdown between domestic and international as it is, and if you say about 55% domestic, about 43% international in terms of the take-home pay, right? That would put this movie's haul at somewhere around $750 million, give or take, right? Rough estimate, meaning $750 million of this $1.6 billion made it back to Disney. If they had spent all in, even as high as $500 million, they would have returned a 50% ROI on theatrical revenue. That is, especially for a spend that high. Pro, would you say that's pretty darn good?
I would say that they easily cleared $600 million in profit, and that's pretty darn good.
600 million?
Well, take a look. You said that it came in between 900 and $1 billion in terms of how much they needed to make a profit because
no.
Between 400 million, 500 million in costs.
So yeah, four to 500 million in costs, and then Disney probably got back about 750, maybe as high as 800 million on this.
Whoa! I have to push back there, Valiant, because I have been a student of yours, and as a student of Dr. Valiant Renegade, I'm aware that the international box office pays back a lower percentage to the studios, and this is a 1-to-2 ratio,
right?
Domestic to international.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, so I don't know, how did you, maybe I misunderstood. So when you said 8 to 9, they made 600 million in profit. I don't know where that would have come from.
Well, if one assumes that they got, let's say that they needed $1 billion to break even. Okay, so let's say that they... okay, so in retail, yes, in retail performance, they probably needed around $1 billion. That would have returned
around 400 to 450 million based on the breakout here, which would have covered the costs.
Right, and
So,
I'm giving them the middle ground of saying 950. So if you go 950 and you look and you say, well, there's 700 million additional above the 950, you consider the international is a little bit higher. That's how I'm coming up with 600 million approximate. Now we're not down into the nitty gritty bean counting here, but somewhere in the vicinity, and we can go to 700. I don't think I can go lower. I don't think I can say it's 500 million.
They probably took home close to 300 million domestically. Okay,
no,
out of the 543.
I'm talking global. That's
okay. So 300 million domestically, and then probably about maybe 500 million internationally. So they took home about 750 million. If they spent 400 to 500 million to make it, and they took home 750, that's where I'm getting the 50% ROI. Right?
Gotcha. Yep.
So about a 250, maybe $300 million profit dollar for dollar on this. So again, bear that in mind. 260 million is what the listed production budget was here. Now, the thing that we have to look at next is this. Let's talk about Mufasa, the Lion King, because the trolls love to be out there talk. Here's the problem. We are 3 weeks into this. Magically, this movie has been exceeding performance expectations very strangely since its opening weekend. It apparently wasn't just a fluke one weekend, next weekend. Can it happen? Sure. But here's the thing. Let's throw all of that out for a second. 476 million. And remember that this movie has been out internationally for a solid week, one whole week longer than Sonic 3, its competitor internationally. 476 million. Its budget listed 200 million, which as we know, is probably what?
Oh, 250 probably.
It's probably low. Exactly. It's the production budget is low because that has been Disney's thing. Now, we also know that Disney would have spent easily another $100 million promoting this. Realistically, considering this movie's above average performance since its abysmal opening weekend, that they absolutely got humiliated by Sonic 3. Disney has, at the very least, very likely, almost guaranteed, thrown in a metric buttload of money in additional marketing dollars, which probably started between 100 and 150. So let's say realistically the production budget for this film is not terribly dissimilar from what they did in 2019 with the Jon Favreau, The Lion King, right? Does anybody think this movie's going to get to 1.6 billion? Mexican Iron Man is here. What do you think?
I think it's painful watching you guys do this, so I brought an Excel chart.
That always fixes things.
So I brought the same Excel chart that me and Valiant used when we did this with Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, we're one step above dry erase boards at this point. Mike.
So I have brought the accounting dry erase board.
Here we go.
Mufasa, Return of the Cub, box office analysis. Domestic, 168. International, 307. These are the normal Disney splits, right?
It's relatively close.
Did you color code this while we were talking?
It's about beautiful. 50. It's about 55% domestic. It's not quite as high as 60 anymore. That was a rarity. So put in about 55. That's on their extreme top end. International is about 43. To be fair, average of 43. We know this, and again, for those of you watching, the reason we know these numbers is because this is what's actually reported by AMC during their public earnings calls. And they have, of any American theater chain that would report here in the States, they have the largest international presence in American-owned international theaters. So when we look at their breakdown, we see that typically, and it's come down a lot since COVID, and that's because the theatrical box office runs of movies have become shorter and shorter due to streaming. So 55% is being very generous on the domestic side. Internationally, 43% is probably also still being a little bit generous. That is ex-China, of course. So we need to pull out whatever they have done in China, which my understanding, if I look here, is negligible.
By the way, I rescind my dry erase board.
Give me a production budget number, Valiant.
Production budget for The Lion King, I would say.
Mufasa, Return of the Cub.
Right. I would say let's split the difference and say 225.
He has 2 shades of beige. This man is an Excel sheet genius.
You like this, don't you, Pro? I knew you'd love this.
I'm amazed.
I knew you'd love this.
I'm adding it to my show next week. Here we go.
All right, give me a marketing budget. What do you guys think?
Minimum at this point, I would say, is 150, considering what I've seen.
And I would say probably it's 200 because they threw everything they had at stopping Sonic.
I would agree as well. I think Sonic shocked the crap out of them so badly. The reason that we have seen, or part of the reason we have seen Mufasa overperform since its opening weekend, which was abysmal, I mean, absolutely humiliatingly abysmal, is because Disney has pumped in scores of additional marketing dollars, and some of those may have gone to buying tickets and donating them. We've seen this before. So
I see red. I see red at the bottom, and I don't think Disney likes that.
Mufasa right now, this is the point. Mike's got it dead on here with the spreadsheet. Mufasa right now, and this is exactly what my estimate is. To go back, if I may, let me bring up the...
So basically, while you're doing that, Valiant, so what we have here is that, assuming this box office is correct and the splits that Valiant got, which are correct because they're we're using the averages from AMC, blah blah blah. That means that Disney would get out of the 168,000 domestic, they get 92 of that, and then of the 43% international, that would yield 132 of the 307.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That gets us. That means Disney's as a studio is going to get 225 if their production costs were 225 million and their marketing was 150. That means their cost outlay is 375, and that means they're in the hole right now, 150 million.
Yeah, I think the 150 million in the hole is a good floor. I think that's where they are, and I think it's probably, if anything, it's probably higher. I'm going to go back to this for a second and remind folks here. 476 million. So based on the chart that Mike has here, if we just take averages, okay, they're in the hole right now, 150 million. It may well be closer to 200 based on everything that we have observed and studied for the last 4 years here on the Renegade Nation with Disney. They need at least another 300 million in box office to comfortably get to a break-even threshold or within the realm of it. I think this movie reasonably needs about 750 million.
And someone tell the audience, Valiant, why is break-even not sufficient for the bean counters?
It's not sufficient for the bean counters specifically at Disney because, as we continue to remind folks, and we always have new people tuning in, but Disney is a special animal because the Walt Disney Company, there's no places for their new IPs to go after they leave the theater, except for Disney Plus. And Disney Plus is basically a loss leader. It's a black hole of money. Sonic 3, on the other hand, for Paramount, and this is the key. And I want to go over here to show people the difference, all right? 476 million for Mufasa, 336 million for Sonic 3. But Sonic 3 has had 1 week less, 1 full week less of exposure internationally than has Mufasa.
Click that international box too when you get a chance, Valiant. I want you to see something on Sonic 3 that I've been tracking.
Yeah, you mean the domestic performance outperforming international?
No. If you go into the international breakdown, there's something fascinating happening.
Yeah.
And maybe the fault of Paramount, but if you go down farther, go down to the individual countries.
Yep.
Notice how many are not reporting at all anything yet. I think that
some of them have not broken out when you go down here to rest of the world.
Right.
But I think there are certain places here that will continue to probably do well. But here's the deal with Sonic 3. This is
just to hop on that. I think Paramount might not have the abilities of Disney in tracking and getting those numbers as quickly. Disney has a better international network, I think.
Yeah, this is the difference right here. The production budget for Sonic 3 is half, repeat, half of The Lion King, Mufasa. And I want to also remind folks that Paramount has started to open the door with regards to other third-party licensing on streaming. I think we're going to see more and more of that. This is going to go to Paramount Plus, no doubt. But Paramount is less stringent with their core IPs, quote unquote, and would absolutely look at this and say, hey, if Netflix wants to throw us a check for $50 or $100 million for this, we'll take it. So there's more money out there to be made, not to mention the fact that Paramount Plus is still in growth phase. And I want to remind folks that Paramount Plus is still in a growth phase right now because they have hyper ridiculous. They have the most popular core of original content on streaming today, bar none, more so than even Netflix in many cases, because they have Taylor Sheridan. I'm talking about Landman. I'm talking about the Yellowstone stuff. I'm talking about Tulsa King. We've been covering this stuff on the Luminate charts. Paramount is wrecking it. Disney's streaming service is hanging on for dear life, and they have given themselves a movie with Mufasa that they have quite literally almost twice as high a hurdle to cross in terms of retail sales to just make their money back as Paramount has. At $122 million, and let's say Paramount slapped out another $100 million bucks on this film in marketing. Right now, they have covered their cost of production. They're already eating into their marketing budget, and they have a far smaller, shorter hill to climb than Disney does. Paramount is absolutely winning this battle in terms of pure finance. That's reality. That's the difference here, guys. And I cannot stress that enough. And one of the things that Disney has talked about here for quite some time, or at least the last 6 to 8 months, Bob Iger's coming out talking about how he's going to rein in the budgets and they're going to do fewer projects. They're going to be higher quality and all of this. Well, Lion King came out and absolutely died. It died, but somehow, magically, it has managed to revitalize itself inexplicably. The music in this show is terrible. I'm not aware that it's really doing any major charting on iTunes. This is my point. I think a lot of this is Disney fugazi. I could understand, like Tom was here last week talking about how maybe a lot of people went out and said that, after they saw Sonic, they went back, they saw Lion King, and they caught up with it. It continues to overperform, which is a little bizarre. I'm not saying it's definitively inorganic, but at the very least, what I think right now is going on, and this is key from a financial perspective, Disney is seemingly spending an extraordinary amount of additional marketing dollars they had not planned for because Disney desperately needed a win. They've been talking about in the last couple of earnings calls how the parks are failing, that they're experiencing, quote unquote, moderated demand in the parks. Deadpool was an outlier. Inside Out 2, likely also an extreme outlier. I don't think a lot of people are going to be watching some of these other Pixar projects that are coming out. I didn't get to the story the other day, but we're going to talk about it tonight, how some transgender themes were removed from a Disney show. And of course, the people at Pixar are screaming bloody freaking murder right now over. I think Disney is so desperate at this point to get any kind of win that they can get at the end of the year that they will do damn near anything. Because I'm having a hard time really seeing the organic excitement over this movie. Mike, Pro, what are your thoughts on this?
So one of the things that we need to see, and we don't have access to yet, but we assume that we will down the road, is we want to see attendance. So we want to see the actual box office ticket sales, not the amount of money. And the reason for that is to find out what's the differential, since Mufasa has largely held on for 3 weeks to the best theaters. And we had thought, by the way, that theaters would, after 2 weeks, go back to giving Sonic more theaters than Mufasa. But that didn't happen. And the really interesting thing about why it didn't happen is because they largely gave those theaters to Nosferatu and back to Wicked, which is strange, but that's what happened.
Wicked I can believe, because Wicked has that drag on it like we've always seen from these young adult to adult musicals that are very female oriented. We saw it with The Greatest Showman. Wicked was different from the standpoint that it was an existing intellectual property. And even the people out there, and this is the point, even the friends that we have out there in our space on YouTube, on X, all those communities that were very critical, like we were righteously, of people like Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, who look like they have like just lost their minds. They've gone nuts. They went to go see the movie and they were like, it was really good. It was really faithful. It was really, really good. They enjoyed it. So like everything lined up for Wicked to just have a great leg out. I'm not seeing any of this for The Lion King, for Mufasa. None of this. And part of the reason I bring this up, and I want to show you mentioned about the butts and seats, Pro. Let me go back to this because this is one of the reasons that I had this brought up. Let's take The Lion King 2019. Okay? 5 years ago. 5 little years ago. Not that, I know it's pre-COVID, but it's 5 years ago. Box office ticket prices since then, Pro, have gone up by what?
Oh, gosh.
Average.
Since 2019, something like 30 to 40%.
30%. 30% is what I was going to go with to be conservative, right?
The reason I'm saying up to 40 is because I'm not sure about IMAX, and Lion King 2024, Mufasa, is, depending on the premium screens, I think way more than Lion King 2019.
Well, they had a lot of IMAX. They had a lot of premium stuff in 2019. Here's the deal. Look at this carefully. If we adjusted the domestic box office up by what we have observed through research from places like Deadline Magazine, from places like Intelligence that they partner with for average ticket prices and admissions over the weekends, right? What have we seen? We have seen that movie ticket prices here in the U.S. are up easily 30% as a floor. A floor, okay? Adjust the domestic box office for butts and seats for 2019's The Lion King. We're talking about a domestic that's over $700 million. As of right now, will Mufasa get to $700 million globally? And bear in mind that what Disney spent on Mufasa versus The Lion King 2019, even if we just use the stated budgets, which we know are lowballing, they're not terribly dissimilar. This is the problem. What do y'all think?
I'll give you one more thing, and then I want Mike to get in here.
Mm-hmm.
Note that The Lion King in 2019 released in the exact same month as Spider-Man No Way Home. Consider what it was up against versus Lion King 2024, Mufasa. I mean, Sonic is no slouch, but Sonic is also no Spider-Man No Way Home.
Wait, No Way Home released Christmas Frame 21.
Far From Home. I'm sorry.
It's
hard when they're all named home.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm just making sure. Yeah, I mean, it released over the summer. It was post Avengers Endgame. You're right. It released, I think, within a week or two of that.
About 2 weeks.
Yeah, but a very, very different audience. And look, you can see here, and I'm not terribly surprised when you look at a 2-to-1 ratio, international to domestic, right, on this one, and you go back here, and you look at the same thing with Mufasa, who, again, had a very similar production budget. And you're looking at, guess what, kids, roughly almost the exact same 2-to-1 international versus domestic box office, but it's far, far smaller. This is the issue, right? This is the point. So regardless of the excess of performance in the last couple of weeks for however it happened, Disney additional marketing, the problem with this still remains the same, is that the amount of spending that's done on this movie is what's really concerning. And again, we've tried to educate, and we've been successful in it, getting Wall Street's attention to look at this and go, this is nice. You can take the headlines for having, biggest this or that. But when you look at the competitors out there from Universal and Paramount and how well they have their cost controls, there's a big problem here. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.